to clarify my perspective. The first is about participation. Participation is not an institution's initiative, it's a citizen's initiative. Citizens are the owner of participation, and participation is about the contribution of citizens to define, implement, and evaluate general aims, standards, and rules of game of the common life. This is important. Participation is action, not only discussion. Of course, it is also discussion. It's not only decisions, but also, I've just said, implementation, evaluation of policies. It is aimed, of course, to change attitudes and behaviors of actors, as well as to affect the course of events. So participative democracy is one part of participation, it's not all the participation. Second remark, the EU, the European Union, is a big democratic experiment. How to build a democratic system without building a state is very important. And in the long history of the European Union, the citizens' participation in public policy making is a traditional attitude, not only in shaping decisions, but also in implementing policies. And in the history of the European Union, there are several examples of autonomous initiatives of citizens that have strong effects. An example, the Bolkestein Directive. Another example, the European Charter of Patients' Rights that strongly contributed to the directive of the European Commission on Patients' Rights or women's rights initiatives. Third remark, participative democracy is a tool to assure a throughput legitimacy of the institutions. Institutions have heard, have listened to the citizens. But we must bear in mind that participation is about results, it's not about good outputs. And of course, it is important. Citizens can have an impact on the institution's agenda. They can give shape to the issues. They can push on priorities. They can change the attitudes and behaviors of policymakers and bureaucrats. Of course, it requires a precise feedback, as it happened in the conference on the future of the Europe. But at the end, the most important thing is that something not established at the beginning happened at the end of the process. So I can move to the Noemi question. Yes, deliberative democracy is aimed at producing better political decisions through an in-depth discussion and open debate, so changing attitudes and opinions of participants, but it is good if it works. And there are many reasons why it cannot work. For example, because of the red tape, because of the number of institutions with different objectives, attitudes that have to work together, because of the presence of vested interests that are at work, for example, the private companies, that is very common in the European Union policies. So I don't think that deliberative democracy alone is enough. Generally, in my experience and also in my research activity, it requires also joint action of citizens. That is the relevance of active citizenship organizations operating Europe-wide at national level, at the Brussels level, and that they were excluded by the conference on the future of Europe, but they have know-how and competencies accumulated in the time, in the space. They have powers, they have link with affected people, they have the ability to start and manage conflicts, because democracy is made of conflicts, of course.
Yeah, I pretty much agree on the importance of these processes, and I also think it would be great to see more of them. Um, I think also that I also think that experiences that we've had in Europe in different contexts in Europe also tell us that one of the main challenges that maybe were posed at the beginning of these processes were that like people don't have the necessary expertise and to work on complex issues. I mean, I think that all the processes that we are seeing, I mean, they tell us that it's not the case. I mean, they do have all the necessary elements and expertise to work on complex issues. I think we just need to make sure that they are they have the necessary elements, the resources to work on complex issues. I mean, also in terms of assistance and administrative assistance and expert assistance. I mean, that's really crucial. And second point, we also need to make sure that we take into account that there are different opportunities for people to participate, and that not everybody can participate in the same way. And so we also need to make sure that this different access to participation is also taken into account when we design these processes.
I respond, okay, but not always and not necessarily. Often at local level, politicians and bureaucrats, remember, politicians and bureaucrats, they are two very different things. They often do not listen to citizens. And in my experience and research, the European Union often is more open and listening to citizens. So my experience is that you have to accompany consultations at local and regional level with other kinds of initiatives, of citizens' initiatives, to make them stronger. For example, campaigns, public mobilizations, monitoring and production of civic information on relevant issues, delivery of services, legal action, information and advice of citizens. So in these cases, when deliberative exercises are not left alone, the impact of citizens is much more big.
I very much agree on the importance of seeing, this kind of exercises also at the local level. I am like my little experience as a political activist, as policymaker at the local level, as member of the local government, tells me, I mean, how important this can be. Not only in the perspective, of the inclusiveness of people. So I mean, to really have this sense of community and to have like people who do take care of the of the issues that affect them in an everyday in their everyday life. So also, I mean, in a commons perspective, I mean, that's what I would say. But I think it's also important in the perspective of local administration, because if you want to have a good local administration, you do need this kind of contribution from citizens. I think that also in this case, as I was mentioning on a broader level before, that the issue of the resources, of the material resources, of time resources, is really, really important. This is something that I could see. I think maybe it's been one of the greatest challenges we've had in terms of citizens' participation, and we need to make sure that a mechanism such as participation, like such as deliberative democracies or similar processes, that is designed in order also to promote inclusiveness and active participation of citizens in the policy design and implementation, does not turn into a mechanism of exclusion, because I do see this threat.
Well, I strongly agree with Karen, because though the conference on the future of Europe gave a serious feedback, precise, detailed feedback to participants, it not be taken for granted the implementation of the proposals. I have already mentioned some cases that can lead to a failure, the red tape, the number power of institutions, the vested interests. So we must be confident, but at the same time skeptical. The case of the European Citizens Initiative, that, as all of you know, it was established in the Lisbon Treaty. It is a case that we have in mind. There are many difficulties precisely in the follow-up of the initiatives of citizens that were promoted and implemented. So a little bit of skepticism is a good attitude, in my opinion.
I think that again, this is a very, very relevant point, and in a way, in my experience, it's also maybe the biggest obstacle to citizens' participation. So in most cases, we have people that are willing to participate, but at the same time, they say, but this is really useless. I mean, I'm just giving my time and a lot of efforts, to put forward some arguments, some ideas, some policy proposals even, and then, they just get rejected. I mean, we just don't get any answer from policymakers. So I think this goes very much to the credibility of policymakers in general. So I myself would be more willing to engage in a deliberative process if I see some credibility in the policymakers in terms of the personal and political history, in terms of their engagement with these issues. So otherwise, I would just think, this is some kind of participative washing, in terms of, okay, we're promoting these deliberative processes, but at the end of the day, we're just gonna ignore everything. So I think this element is important on the side, of the approach policymakers have. But I think there is also another side of the coin, which is how much are we willing, we as citizens, to make sure that all our efforts don't get just ignored, meaning that we engage in this process, but at the same time, I think it's also crucial that if we really care about what we've been working on, we also insist, make some pressure, advocacy, etc., and we make policymakers accountable for following on the processes of deliberative democracies, or just ignoring them. So accountability is crucial in this sense.
Yes, I've seen that in the conclusions of the conference, a similar proposal was put on the table. Yes, I answer yes, it could be, in case the first experiment will produce tangible results. That means not only decisions, but a concrete impact on the life of the Union and on the relations of the Union with the citizenry. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the risk is of wasting time and to paradoxically generate what has been called participation fatigue and frustration. We must remember that participation is not a job. So when a lot of people is invited to join and participate for time, spending time and gathering information and debating, etc., the results of this process must be visible and concrete. Otherwise, there is a risk of a boomerang effect of these exercises. But on the contrary, if the first conference will produce results, yes, it could be made permanent.
I think that it is really important to test, experiment also, some interesting tools that are open to the participation of people across Europe. And I mean, if we look at also at the recent history of initiatives and tools that have been developed across Europe, we also see that there are some cases of tools that were not really, so to speak, exciting at the beginning. I mean, people were not really excited about engaging in these processes. And one example could be the European Citizens Initiative. So even though there was this kind of some sort of skepticism at the very beginning, then let's say that the concrete practice has also shown us that some room for agency exists within these initiatives, and they can be meaningful in terms of promoting change. In the case of the European Citizens Initiative, this has happened even in very sensitive policy areas. So I would say that even in the case at hand, it would be really, really important to keep this experimenting phase, see how it goes on, and perhaps make it even more structured and stable, and maybe something great could come up out of this. At the same time, just be aware that this cannot be the only solution. I think, okay, let's try this, but at the same time, we just also need to keep many other avenues open.